Sam, and I'm making this quick video. Here I'm actually in front of the Conservatory of Flowers in Golden Gate Park, and we have Mercury Retrograde coming up on January 21st. Wednesday it starts. Mercury will be retrograde for, you know, like three and a half weeks or so, as it usually is. And it'll be retrograde in Capricorn, which is a sign of actually facing our tangible fears. It's ruled by Saturn, which has to do with the awareness of time and how time changes and transforms and ultimately destroys all of our sort of comfort zones. So making peace with that, being able to let go of that expectation that everything's okay, right? It's kind of funny, you know, like when I do readings, I'm not trying to laugh at people because I also want the same thing, but people will say, you know, I'll say, so is there any questions that you have or whatever? And I'll say, well, you know, I just want to know if everything will be okay. Like, everything's going to be all right, right? Like, just this kind of general. And I feel like saying, no, it's not. You know, or they'll say, so nothing bad's going to happen, right? I'm like, no, something bad's going to happen. It's always going to happen. I'm sort of joking, but, you know, we just want to know that everything's okay, nothing's going to change, nothing bad's going to happen, and of course, you know, nothing bad, quote, is going to happen, but everything's going to change, and it's going to scare us when it does, and that just kind of general stress and fear and worry about that in general comes from Saturn, and wanting to know that our family's safe, and that we have enough money, and that we're healthy, and all of that. So we spend a lot of time and energy making a commitment to certain things that we don't necessarily like, but that give us that feeling of safety and security. But if that becomes too dominant, and we're just building up a structure that's based on fear, not based on why we're here, because ultimately we have to be willing to let go of everything and realize that everything is going to go and that we don't have any control over those sorts of things. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it's an opportunity to reflect and go inward and develop greater discrimination and greater intelligence around these ideas in general. But when it goes retrograde in Saturn's sign, we're going to really be challenged to face those inner demons and those things we're trying to control in order to feel safe. So, in some ways, you know, the benefit of Mercury retrograde is that we become more introspective, and we have to listen more, listen to the messages that are coming from the cosmos that are teaching us about how well we're handling all of these issues. That's what retrograde is about. It backs up relative to our position on Earth, and it becomes more introspective. And the introspective part of Mercury is listening, not just talking. Communication is a two-way street. Of course, this affects our relations with other people, but also affects our relations with ourselves, which is where it starts. So a greater listening to the message that's coming back to you from other people as well as from the cosmos is important. And in some ways, it may feel like you're descending into a dark hole, into a cave. However, as you can hear, this particular cave is producing some beautiful music. Sometimes the cave produces beautiful music. You never know what you'll find inside the cave. cool, huh? You hear that joy and beauty emanating from the cave. That's similar to what we may experience in this Mercury retrograde coming up, because we might be afraid of the darkness, but that's where the sweet music is. Okay, so I've worn out the metaphor, but it's really true. And if you think about it in your life, the great lessons that you've learned have come from facing something that was at first unpleasant. And then you adjust your mind to it. It teaches you something that you simply couldn't have learned without having gone into that sort of cave, into that tunnel. And what happened when you went into the cave and went into the tunnel is you listened with more objectivity, with more openness, instead of being convinced that the message you've believed in the past was going to be true in the future. The past doesn't equal the future. This is a simple statement of Tony Robbins. He says this a lot. It might be tempting to dismiss that as cheesy, but for many people the past does equal the future, and I'm sure there are parts of your mind where at times you also act as though the past equals the future. I've been getting into a lot of discussions lately with people, and that includes students and other, spiritual people, so to speak, who have been really defending their trauma and their pain as being inevitable and real and unalterable. Some of this comes from Jupiter being retrograde right now. We tend to forget our teachings when Jupiter is retrograde. We tend to forget our wisdom. And we start thinking, well, of course I'm suffering. Of course this is how I am. I have this in my chart. Doesn't that determine that I'm going to see it this way, that I'm going to suffer? And just defending their pain. And of course, if I were to practice astrology that way, I would be a real hack. If I were to say, well, it's in your chart, so you're determined to suffer and you're going to keep suffering until it stops. People would get really angry at me. I don't say that because I know that's not true, because suffering can be a catalyst for greatness. So if you've been forgetting your higher teachings and higher wisdom lately, it's okay. The Jupiter retrograde has been showing some of that, at least that tendency. Now that Mercury turns retrograde, opposite Jupiter retrograde, it's a time to introspect and reflect on the true meaning of things and develop greater discrimination. Now, of course, there's the typical things that sort of back up and foul up, like you might have a problem with the computer or this or that. This is just a symptom of how well you're managing the outer details. That's what Mercury also rules, the outer details. If you're overwhelmed by detail, you're going to see some of them failing right now. So, of course, you want to prepare for that and make sure those things are as tight as possible. But it's the inner details and the interpretation of what every little detail means, which is the highest quality of Mercury. And again, a big part of that comes from listening. Listen to what people tell you. If you're having a hard time keeping friends or making money or whatever it is, notice how it's not the excuse. It's not the past. The past doesn't equal the future. The mistakes you've made in the past don't equal the future. The things that were done to you in the past don't determine what you're going to do in the future. And if you're thinking that's the case, it's because of Mercury. The story in your head needs to be adjusted because that story is up for grabs. And you're telling it. You're telling it to yourself. That's what Mercury is. The one closest to the sun. And the story you're telling yourself about what things mean is always up for grabs, and it's up to you to make sure that it's correct. So I hope this was helpful. Leave me some comments. Let me know how things are going for you.